Hi everyone, this is Andrew Silbaugh, the Director of Instructional Technology and Middle School Technology teacher. This PowerPoint will go over Module 1 of the Site Development Associate course that is offered at Renaissance Charter School at St. Lucie. This is Module 1, Markup Language and Site Development Essentials, and this is Day 1. So, when we begin this course, we have to ask ourselves, why do we study web design? Web design has increased over the past few years, going from very basic and simple websites to the much complex and very detailed websites that we have today. Some jobs now require people to have some web design experience, and some people can be asked to design a website even if they have no experience. I tell my students that I had this experience when I was in one of my jobs as a teacher where I had to create a website even though I had not really learned how to do web design yet. Some of the current skills used in web design, especially tied to businesses, informing coworkers about team projects, keeping them all together in the loop, making sure they know what's going on, using or contributing to a company intranet, sharing materials and resources in a company setting, working with customers online. This is especially huge now with people who are selling and buying things online. Posting or getting resumes from different people so that people can apply for jobs or even obtain jobs. Additionally, collecting information from customers about their interests, trying to tailor their web design experience, as well as collecting information from social networking and trying to get data from them to do marketing and other things of that nature. Some of the other reasons for web design that we may use: you may want to work as a web designer. These people could have responsibilities for an entire company or an organization. And in our class, we'll be helping you to become successful as a web designer. We'll learn to talk about text editors and graphical editors and use both in this course in order to supplement our web design. Some of the basics about web design: web pages are no longer just viewed through web browsers such as Chrome, Firefox, Edge, and Safari. Instead, most people today view web pages through smartphones, tablets, smart TVs, and gaming consoles. So it's kind of changed over the past few years. We've gone from these gigantic screens to these very little screens. These devices are capable of reading what's called markup languages, and HTML is one of those markup languages. There is a great push these days for responsive design, and as a result, web design has come a very long way, and it continues to evolve to this day. As you may have noticed, we do have some key terms in this one. Some key terms here: markup language. This is a series of commands used to format, organize, or describe information on a web page. And we also have responsive design. This is an approach to web development that uses a series of techniques to make web pages dynamic and accessible on all device screen sizes. Essentially, markup languages, these are commands that allow information to be described and appear on a web page. The markup language is the language that allows web design to take place. Responsive languages, or responsive design rather, what this is and what we're focused on here is we're using web technologies to make sure that web pages look really, really cool and really interesting. But also, more importantly, these days, is that we're making sure our web designs look appropriate for people who may have an exceptionality or may have different impairments that allow them to fully immerse themselves in the web design while still being able to use it at the same time. Hypertext markup language, also known as HTML, is very important in web page creation. This is one of the most widely used languages for web design. This is the standard markup language on the web. HTML is standardized by the World Wide Web Consortium, W3C, also known as W3.org. HTML is the language that defines page structure, hyperlinks, graphics, and more. This is your core foundation of your web page. HTML can be entered into a text editor manually, or we can use a GUI, a graphical user interface, to automatically enter the text, or we can use a combination of both methods. Again, a key term for that slide, hypertext markup language. This is the traditional authoring language used to develop web pages for many applications. Essentially, hypertext markup language is a language to develop web pages, and it's one of the most widely used ones. Cascading style sheets, known as CSS, these are rules for styles on web pages. Typically, these rules are in an external file, but sometimes they can be embedded inside the HTML web design. This determines how HTML elements are displayed on a web page. CSS is used to define the font, the color, and the phrase elements of a web page. CSS is currently in version 3, and if all pages are linked to the same sheet, one change on the sheet allows for multiple uniform changes across a web page. CSS is very useful because it saves time and allows for more consistency and more uniform web pages. Again, a key term, cascading style sheet. This is a technology that allows greater style definition and formatting control of HTML elements. Formatting can be placed within the HTML or called remotely from an external style sheet. Essentially, CSS is what makes your HTML look good. Your HTML is your foundation, while your CSS is all of the layers on top of it to make it look really, really interesting. And again, formatting for CSS can be embedded within the HTML itself, or more popularly, it can be called on remotely from a different style sheet that is located outside of the HTML document. Some additional notes here about HTML and CSS3. Web pages are more than HTML and CSS3. Other languages and processors such as JavaScript, React, and SASS can be used to make your web design even greater. We'll touch on some of these other languages throughout our year, but these won't be the primary focus here. At this point, I would encourage you to watch Lesson 1 video in our course site. Web design is not without any issues. One of the biggest issues right now is mobile issues in web design. Web development has been impacted by new technologies. Smaller screens are now being used to view web pages that were once large full-screen objects. Limited screen sizes cause web designers to modify their websites. But because of this, web designers can also make their own mobile sites, and we'll talk how to make our own mobile version of a site in the coming weeks. Cloud computing is another issue in web design. Cloud computing occurs when information is stored over the internet and is accessed from remote locations than rather being stored on a particular campus. In the cloud, software and services are provided over the internet, and data is accessed remotely rather than being quicker to access on a campus. Cloud services include social networks and blogs, and also we typically will include sites like Weebly and Wix as well, since those are developed over the cloud and are being brought to you from a different point and a different server across the globe. These sites do not require HTML and it's just point and click, so you can build a website without really having to do any programming. These definitely have their benefits if you've never done any web design before, but in our course we'll focus on actually using HTML. And again, cloud computing here means software, infrastructure, and platform services that are hosted by a remote data center and provided to organizations or individuals over the internet. Essentially, this is software and other information over the internet that is brought to a computer without being connected to a local server. Now, we'll talk about text editors. Text editors is a special way to edit HTML. When you use a text editor, you don't need a specific type or special editor to do so. There are programs that allow you to type text and edit it. If you do decide to use a text editor, you must save it as a plain text. You wouldn't use Microsoft Word in this case to save your file because Microsoft Word saves it as a .doc or .docx file, which prevents it from being displayed as a web page. When you are done with these types of files, you would save them with the file extension .html or .htm. For example, Silbaugh.html. This would then allow the page to be opened as a web page. Many operating systems and browsers have multi-purpose Internet Mail extensions, also known as MIME, to process and access these files. We're going to use a text editor to start until we get used to the process, and then we'll move to a GUI. Some of the more popular text editors include Notepad, which is what we'll use at first, Cream, Emacs, JEdit, Notepad+, it's also a very good one, Sublime Text, and Vim. These are just basic ways that you could type in the text and code, and then you would save it as an HTML file. A key term, as mentioned on the other slides, multi-purpose Internet Mail Extension, also called MIME. This is a protocol that enables operating systems to map file name extensions to corresponding applications. These are also used by applications to automatically process files downloaded from the internet. Essentially, what this means is this is a understanding or way for the computer to process a specific file and then allow it to open it in the specific application. So for example, I've been using the example of Microsoft Word, in which you type it in Microsoft Word, and when you're done, the MIME works to open that file that you've saved in Microsoft Word. It says, hey, I see that this is a Microsoft Word file. Let me go ahead and open that up for you in Microsoft Word. That's exactly what a MIME does. MIME serves as kind of the middleman between the program you're opening and the program that you'll use to open it with. GUIs, also called graphical user interfaces, this is kind of the exact opposite of a typing markup language. The GUI does the typing for you. However, we use caution here because not all GUIs are 100% accurate. It's much easier to code since you don't actually have to write the code. The ways that you could do this, depending on the application, you could do point and click, where you point on what you need, click it, and it adds it. You type short phrases and it types the rest. And drop-down menus could all be used here in order to do the GUI. Commands are displayed on one side, and the final result is displayed on the other. Some developers like it because it saves time, and others question the validity of the code. I myself like it because it does save time and makes web design and your final product quicker and easier. Some of the GUI editors that are more popular: Adobe Dreamweaver, Expression Web, Mozilla SeaMonkey, Google Web Designer, and in our course we'll be using Trinket because it works with our Clever and allows students to have their own accounts. So why do we learn markup language? GUI editors are not always up to date with the latest of code. However, most times you can modify the code that may be right. So you may realize the GUI has created the code, but there's some errors in it that's not going to display right, and you could use your knowledge of HTML to fix it. If you know HTML, you can fix it and add code where needed. In addition, if you learn any scripting or programming language, you'll need to write the code manually. So this is good practice to get you writing the code. You can also update your page later to the latest standards if you need be. Finally, a key term, graphical user interface, or GUI. This is a program that provides visual navigation with menus and screen icons and performs automated functions when users click the command buttons. Essentially, this allows you to do basic web design without having to do too much typing. Everything is mostly done for you. You just have to click where it goes. Finally, in closing, HTML is the foundation for web design. CSS is a support for HTML by adding more design to it. Cloud computing and mobile devices have impacted web design. Text editors and GUIs have many pros and cons. Now, as we look ahead in the next lesson, we'll talk about the history of markup language, and we'll do a lab involving different markup languages and review some of the current standards. Thank you for viewing this presentation. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me. I can always be reached at Silbaugh@stluciecharter.org.